It's just one word. 2 letters.
Hey everyone, welcome back. This is part 2 of Chapter 2 of our Let's Read of Archangel. Book 1 of Shadows Advent, my debut novel. If you missed Chapter 1 or Part 1 of Chapter 2, I'm going to put a link down below to the playlist, and that will let you catch up, and then you can come right back here and we'll keep going. Where we left off, Uriel, after leaving a broken down village filled with absolutely no one except for a body and some sad memories, went through a forest being chased by hellhounds and came upon a cottage where he sensed that a child was inside. He was able to sense this because angels can innately detect innocence when it's nearby, especially a child being the most innocent of anything. It was very easy for him to pick it up from far away. But when he got there, it was being, so he thought, held captive by a cambion, a half-demon, half-human, with red eyes that make it distinguishable. Now, angels have an innate hatred for these creatures. Anything infernal they have a hatred for and immediately want to exterminate. But this seemed like a unique situation because the cambion and the young girl were protective of each other and cared about each other. And the cambion went so far as saying that they were sisters. So, Uriel, even though his temper is getting the better of him and he really, really wants to just smite this half-demon, decided he's going to listen for the sake of the child. And before we get started, something very serious to talk about. In this second part of Chapter 2, there is an allusion to or reference to sexual violence. It's not descriptive. It was difficult for me to write, but I know if anyone has a history of being a victim of sexual violence, or maybe their friend was or a loved one was, and that description can trigger you, I suggest not watching this video. I'm putting a link down below to my website where I provide a summary of this part of Chapter 2, so you don't have to listen to that. Other than that, let's get started. And since you can't see quotation marks when I'm reading, and I'm not great at doing voices, know that this next section is all told from the cambion's point of view. It's all dialogue describing this story. Years ago, before this all began, before either of us were born, there was a woman. She was perfect, the envy of all who ever laid eyes upon her. She was blessed with beauty, golden curls that danced as she walked, piercing blue eyes that were so gorgeous you could only look at them for a few seconds. Any more, and you would find yourself feeling unworthy of the sight. She was a tiny creature, delicate and soft. Despite how she radiated beauty, she refused the approaches of each and every man, waiting for the one she knew must be coming. You see, she was an extremely devout woman. She prayed every night to a God who would soon turn his back on the world, praying that one day she would find the soul that was praying just as hard to find hers. And so great was her beauty that all men, even those she turned away, still loved her, for her kindness and compassion extended to everyone. If anyone were deserving of having their prayers answered, it was her. But one evening, when she finished praying, something else, something terrible, answered. It was that night that the war between heaven and hell began. She heard screams and cries of pain from outside her window as death spilled onto the streets. She dared to steal a glance and saw the carnage of angels and demons, humans and monstrosities all tearing each other to pieces. The roads ran red with the blood of the people she loved, wet like the tears that fell from her eyes as they witnessed the end of the world. She ran, terrified, trying to find some place that was safe from the violence. Still, every night she prayed. Every night, God continued to ignore her prayers as the legions of heaven were obliterated. Not all hope was lost, though. She managed to find some familiar faces, people who remembered her kindness and generosity, people who took her in. For years they survived, their numbers slowly dwindling until there were only a handful of them left. Nowhere was safe. Each night was spent in fear, every day running. Late one night, while she slept, a legion of demons descended upon the small group. They slaughtered without mercy, reveling in the orgy of blood and pain. But they did not kill her. How could they? With her beauty, even after the carnage of the apocalypse, they could not bring themselves to waste such a prize. Instead, they used her as an example, to mock the God that had given her those looks. They cut her and burned her. They tore at her flesh and made her scream until her throat was raw. But it still wasn't enough. The leader of the demons leaned down to her swollen, unrecognizable face and heard her murmuring, praying to God in hopes that somehow he would protect her. The demon laughed in her face, then whispered in her ear, "I have a message for your almighty God." He laughed as he raped her, laughed at her broken body, laughing upwards at God, who created such a beautiful woman that was now nothing more than a demon's plaything. They did not kill the woman, They left her there, broken and crippled. For days she lay in the pool of blood and bodies left in the horde's wake. But the whole time she felt it, a darkness growing inside of her, and she knew that she carried the demon's seed. So there she stayed, waiting to die, not capable of moving or even opening her eyes. Then, just as she was about to give in, to let death come for her like it had for everyone she had ever known, she felt something. She couldn't explain it, but it was warm, and it was good. She felt it draw closer and closer, and the thing in her womb stirred at its presence. She managed to whimper a noise, sounding almost like the hello she was hoping for. Suddenly, she felt warming hands on her bruised and bloodied flesh. She tried to open her eyes, but they were swollen shut. The grim thought of whether she even had eyes anymore dawned on her. "Do not worry," said a gentle voice. "I am an angel of the Lord." The woman would have smiled, but each breath seemed like a conscious effort. "Your suffering is over now," the voice continued. "I can fix you if you so desire, but know that the demon who defiled you left his seed. It has conceived twins, 2 half-human, half-demon children inside of your body. If I heal you, the creatures will likely kill you as you give birth, which, judging from their maturity, is imminent." The voice hesitated before giving an alternative option. "However, you have another choice. I can attempt to purify the children, rid them of their demonic essence. They will still be born in a matter of hours, and you will probably die from the strain of birth, but they will be your children, and I promise they will be left in the care of one of my angels." The woman felt the embryos roll and kick inside her as the angel tried to comfort her, his warm hands gently brushing her disfigured cheek. "We are isolated from heaven, though. I'm sorry, but I simply do not have the power to heal you and purify them. The choice is yours." The woman had already made her decision. She was tired of the agony that she had endured here on earth. She knew that she could take no more. The woman moved her broken arm so her hand rested on her stomach. The sheer size of it would have shocked her if she was not about to offer up her life. With all the force she could muster, she whispered out a dry, "Save them," to the angel. The angel lowered her back to the ground, and she could feel as he moved his warm, comforting hands toward her abdomen. A soft trickle of heat began coursing through her veins. Through her sealed eyelids she thought she saw a dim glow. It endured for a few brief seconds, and then it was done. She tried speaking again, but it was tough. "Did work?" she managed to ask. The angel's voice seemed more hesitant this time. "Yes, it seems like it has. Now we wait." They didn't have to wait long. The birth began within a few hours. She knew that there were many angels now, all listening to the one who had spoken to her. They all surrounded her, comforting her with warm touches and all but numbing her through the pain of the birth. She could feel her body growing weaker as she brought those 2 children into the world. The first birth happened relatively easily, though she hardly felt anything with the angel's warming hands. The second child, however, was different. As she felt it come out of her, there was a sudden sense of alarm. She heard one of the angels shout, "Monster!" as he withdrew his hands from her. The now familiar sound of a sword being drawn rang in her ears. The other angels, just as panicked, seemed to jump away, not necessarily from the woman, but from something else. And as the warming touch of the angels disappeared, the woman felt a flash of tremendous pain as every cut, bruise, and tear ignited in agony. It was only for a brief second, however, and it was the last thing she ever felt. "And that is how I killed my mother, simply by being born," finished the cambion. The story more than intrigued Uriel, both for the slight amount of compassion it stirred inside of him for this creature, and for the angel that had attempted to purify both children. It was obviously unsuccessful. Uriel could feel the innocence radiating from the girl sitting next to the half-demon, but it was a feat that was nearly impossible. Usually, when cambions were conceived, the children were birthed in secret, and the gestation period was so short that angels, even if they knew about it, would have little time to react. He had only witnessed a single purification of a cambion embryo before, and had only heard of a few others. Each one had been performed by the same angel, an archangel no less, one of his brothers, an angel that was created with the very essence of their father. Only a few of the archangels were left, Uriel knew. "The angel that assisted your mother, did he have a name?" "Well, I'm sure he did," the woman answered sarcastically, "but I never learned it, nor did my mother." "And how do you know that? How do you know anything about your mother if your birth killed her?" Uriel immediately looked to the child. He should have picked his words more carefully, for her sake. The young girl seemed unfazed at the mention of her mother's death, though. "When I was growing inside her, the demonic part of me peered into her soul," the cambion replied. "I learned her every memory, fault, desire, and regret. I knew her as if I was her, and those memories never faded. My sister does not remember, since the demon in her was destroyed and her human brain was too immature." Uriel examined the 2 girls. The cambion may be better described as a woman now. They very well could have been twins, but they looked separated by over a decade. Little was known about cambions, but Uriel knew that they matured at a much faster rate than humans. He saw that they truly cared for one another. The only fear that emanated from the human girl was caused by his own presence. He noticed how dirty and hurt both of them were, with bruises and small cuts on their faces and arms. This house, this world, was no place for a child. Uriel sighed, his lips curling into a smile. Both of you look like you've been through far too much. Perhaps I can offer some aid? The angel spread his empty hands in front of him. He still did not trust the cambion, but she did not seem to be a threat, and Uriel knew he could at least try to earn their trust. He knew nothing of this infernal world and, as much as he hated to admit it, needed assistance. Please, let me do what I can to heal you, both of you, as a sign of good faith. The cambion's face shifted as she debated whether to trust the angel. And then you'll get the hell out of here? She looked him dead in the eyes as she said it. And then we will talk some more. I promise no harm will come to you or your sister. The last word was forced out of the angel's mouth. I am an angel of the Lord. I would not lie when it comes to this child. The woman thought over his words. It was difficult for the archangel to keep his hatred in check. He held no love for this creature or her ilk, but the girl was a human, so he would not harm her. Okay, the cambion finally agreed. You're in luck. The sigils on the wall will prevent anyone outside of here from noticing you. Uriel felt a small sense of relief hearing that and had the slightest temptation then to just obliterate the cambion where she was. But the more he thought about it, the more the archangel realized that he could use her help. The smiting could wait. There would be no shortage of monstrous creatures to destroy. The angel slowly rose and advanced towards where the pair was sitting, his palms in front of him and facing up. He was not gifted with healing, far from it, but little cuts and bruises, fractured bones, and simple illnesses were all within his abilities to mend. When he was within arm's reach of them, his hands glowed a soft yellow. Please, place your hands in mine, the angel said, offering his open palms. The cambion and the child complied, holding each other's hands and placing their free ones in his own. Uriel watched as the sisters began to glow, starting with their hands, then up their arms. The soft yellow light soon flooded over their entirety. After a few brief seconds, the glow faded. Uriel witnessed as the cuts, bruises, and dirt that marred their skin vanished. The two looked refreshed and rejuvenated. The archangel, his innate hatred for the cambion somewhat lessened after her tale, was still curious. How did you survive after your birth? He asked the half-demon. It is doubtful the angels would have allowed you to live. I'll thank whichever one of you tried to purify me, the cambion replied. Somehow, when he was working his magic, the souls of my sister and I became entangled, as if the demon did not want to let go of either of our souls. The angel realized this and told the others that if one of us dies, the other would too. Whether or not he was telling the truth, I have no idea, but it saved my ass, so I'll go with it. Uriel had never heard of such a thing before, but he was certain that the angel who attempted the purification was Raphael, one of his brothers, and he trusted his word. But you were simply infants. How did you survive? The archangel inquired further. The angel that saved us was the leader of the group. He ordered one of the other angels, Uriel, to look after us. For 5 years he took care of us. He killed any who came near us and raised us like a father, I guess. There was pain in the cambion's voice. Uriel knew Uriel, or rather, knew of him. He was one of Raphael's followers, an angel of great power and knowledge. Knowing that Uriel was present at the purification attempt gave Uriel more hope that Raphael was still alive. But that was 7 years ago. A lot of angels lost their lives in that time. And where is Uriel? Uriel asked, hoping he could get more assistance than this half-demon. He died, protecting us. A witch and her familiar found this house. Neither Hadriel's power nor mine hid us from her. She broke in and used her magic to kill him. She tried to do the same with me, but their magic doesn't have the same effect against a half-demon. My knife worked fine against her, though. I butchered her and her pet and tossed what was left of them in the creek behind the house. I hope something ate the bitch. Uriel's heart sank at Hadriel's fate, though he was not surprised. The number of angels left on earth would pale in comparison to the legions that descended during the onset of the war. The archangel noticed the young girl playing with something in her hair. Uriel realized that both she and the cambion had a feather, the color of fallen snow, tied into their golden and raven locks. It was an angelic custom to keep a feather of a fallen brother or sister in remembrance. It made Uriel think, just for a moment, that maybe he had jumped to conclusions too quickly. He certainly could not kill her, not if it also killed the child, but maybe they could help him. If Raphael were still alive, Uriel wanted to find any other angels he could rally to his rebellion. Maybe I judge you too hastily, cambion, Uriel said, a hint of shame in his voice. I am Uriel, an angel of his presence and an archangel of heaven. May I ask what your names are? The cambion's eyes widened at the introduction. She did her best to maintain her composure upon discovering Uriel's true nature. An archangel, huh? Well, I'm Chandra, and this is Elena, the little girl chimed in, speaking for the first time since Chandra had told her story. Uriel knew that he had terrified her, but he was glad to see that both of them were beginning to relax around him. Maybe not the cambion, Chandra, who seemed even more shaken after learning exactly what Uriel was. Hello, Elena. It's very nice to meet you. Uriel was better at handling a blade than speaking with human children. They were almost too innocent for him to fathom. He turned to Chandra. I have been sent from heaven. I am to renew the fight against the plague of darkness that has consumed this world. The cambion laughed a sharp, sarcastic noise. A bit late for that, don't you think? The world has gone to shit, and you think one angel will change anything? Your whole army failed. How will one choir boy succeed? Uriel was not pleased with her tone or sarcasm, but he chose to ignore it. It was our father's plan. I shall not question it. If it is my duty to turn the tides of battle, then I shall not falter. Uriel was a skilled fighter, as much as any of his brothers, but open warfare was always his preference. The Archangel was good at destroying things, plain and simple. But I will need help. Chandra paused, studying the angel. With what? What could I possibly do for an angel of the Lord? The cambion sneered. I do not know this land, nor the denizens that walk it. Lucifer's power is so great that he has blocked our view from heaven. I need someone who knows the area and the powers that rule here. Surely Lucifer cannot control it all himself. Everyone knows that the demon lords rule like warlords around here, constantly fighting each other. Bodis owns this area. That snake is pathetic, though. How he clings to power is beyond me. His demons swarm his territory like bugs. I don't know how many he actually has. Uriel nodded. Suddenly, the dense evil in the distance made sense to the Archangel. The Archangel recognized the name Bodis, too. Uriel knew almost the entirety of the hierarchy of hell. It was frequently his job to counsel Gabriel and Michael when they would combat their forces. He agreed with Chandra. Bodis was an Earl of Hell, but by himself was not powerful. He was a fighter of some skill, but any angel worth their wings would be more than a match for him. He was a leader for his knowledge and intellect, and Lucifer supplied him with 60 legions of demons. Before the war started, he would have had hundreds of thousands of the creatures at his personal disposal. With the black clouds that hovered above them, not even the hosts of heaven knew how many demons were still under his control, and whatever number was left did not include the various creatures and tainted humans that would also follow Bodis. Uriel felt a pang of sorrow knowing that there may even be fallen angels among the Earl's ranks. If Bodis was alive, he would have an army. He would have a kingdom that he ruled over. That meant he would have a palace where they would reside. That had to be the darkness he felt at the edge of his mind. The Archangel finally realized how intimidating his task was. Get me to Bodis' stronghold. That is all I ask of you, Uriel said to Chandra. Her knowledge of the land would be invaluable to him. After that, I will leave you and your sister alone. The half-demon weighed the angel's words. Uriel was worried she might say no. Okay, choir boy, I'll tell you what. I'll lead you there and even help you get to Bodis himself. But the witch that killed Hadriel was one of Bodis's, so I get to slit that bastard's throat myself. And so ends Chapter 2. A lot going on there. Very dark story that led to Chandra and Elena's existence, really. And if you're just skipping over to here, we learned that Chandra, the Cambion's name is Chandra, and the human girl's name is Elena, and they're twins. And they were both actually half human, half demon, until Uriel assumes is Raphael, another archangel, purified one of the children while they were still in their mom's womb. Unfortunately, the childbirth killed their mother, and Chandra blames herself for that. The cambion was an interesting creature for me to come up with, or species or race or whatever you want to call it. There's some lore that exists behind half demon, half human entities when you look at theology or when you look at other fantasy works or things like that. You play D&D, they're tiefling. They're essentially half demon. What makes the cambion so helpful in this story is that she was able to age or mature a lot faster than her human sister was. So while her sister is 7 years old, while Elena is 7 years old, and a 7-year-old child, Chandra is also 7 years old, but has essentially matured into adulthood and can then protect her sister since their foster father was killed by a witch. And actually, a neat little Easter egg for anyone that stuck around this long, Hadriel, the angel that became the father figure to Chandra and Elena, he was invented way back when I was catching up on Dexter, the show, before the series finale because we don't talk about that. But Hadriel is essentially an homage to Harry, who was Dexter's adoptive dad, who helped take this troubled, potentially dangerous youth and molded him into something that can use those same motives for good. So, little Easter egg for you in there. Other than that, so ends Chapter 2. If you have any comments, want to point anything out, want to ask any questions, leave them down in the comments below. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. For those that did have to skip over the violence that happened in the first bit of the chapter, click down below to read a summary about it in a way that I hope is appropriate. Also check out the rest of my website, and I'll see you next week for Chapter 3.